Madam Chair, we're live and ready when you are.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Seldovia Planning Commission to order and begin with a roll call vote. Commissioner Boasberg, Commissioner Kroll, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Ryan is absent. And for the record, this is Randy Sweet as the acting chair. The next item is approval of the agenda. Could somebody make a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Or
We're
no?
going to do a roll call vote.
Okay. Sorry. We'll go ahead and do the roll call vote. Commissioner Boasberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Kroll.
Approved.
We'll go back to Commissioner Boasberg.
I approve.
Thank you. And this is Randy Sweet approved. So the agenda has been approved. The next item is the approval of minutes. Can somebody make a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve, approve the minutes.
Somebody second?
Yes, I'll approve it.
Any discussion? So I guess I need to do a correction in terms of me as I also, this is Randy Sweet and I also approve. Sorry. Any rate, any discussion? And the minutes are on pages 5 through 7 of the packet.
Yep.
So I will then do a roll call vote to approve the minutes. Commissioner Boasberg,
Yeah, I'll approve.
Commissioner Kroll,
Approved.
and this is Randy Sweet. I also approve the minutes. The minutes have been approved. The next item is public comments regarding items not on the agenda. Is there any public that wishes to make any comments?
Madam Chair, we don't see any members of the public wishing to make comments.
Thank you. And public hearings prior notice, I'm assuming that we have none. And then the second is consideration. The next one is consideration of site plans. We have none. So we go into item H, which is commission business, and the item for discussion is Title 18 commercial business district nightly rentals and recreational vehicles within the city. And the pages 8 to 46 in the packet are for that item. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you. And I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Liz Diamond. I'm now the city clerk because Ms. Gagel here is now our city manager. So bear with me because this is my first meeting that we're doing. So I appreciate your patience. And I'm going to pull up in our packet here and put it on the screen share. And so I've looked through and kind of looked over the last discussion that you guys had at your last commission meeting, and it was asked for just some more information about how the commercial business district is being used currently. And so I just wanted to kind of go through that here. So just for me, I like aerial photos. So this is the area of town that we're talking about here. And let me go back and see. I might have to scroll back a little bit here in my notes. So if you've looked through the material, I put together just kind of a little chart here, a summary of what's in the commercial business district, how it's being used currently. And so there are 29 parcels. 3 of those lots are vacant. We have 2 long-term residential rentals that have had permits in the past. We can have up to 3 based on the 10% rule. And later in the packet, you'll see that there is a copy of the administrative permit for long-term residential rentals. We have 12 lots that are commercial business occupied, 5 that are vacant structures, and 6 that are properties that kind of have an unclear primary business use or have accessory use for properties that adjoin or don't adjoin them. So that's just kind of the summary of where those 29 parcels stand. There are, I think, 6 that are like Tidewater parcels, but we didn't include those in the discussion. So it was asked last time just to get kind of an overview of where that is. And I just kind of wanted to point out in the chart that one of the topics of discussion was nightly rentals within the district. And there are a couple, one parcel where they are renovating for nightly rentals and one that's being used as nightly rentals now, which under the current code, it's not commercial use that's allowed in the district. And so I think the discussion is how, if that is a commercial use, and how we want to put that into the land use table and the permitted uses. So this was kind of the information that was asked to gather. The rest of the stuff that's in the packet is kind of from our previous meeting, just to get a little bit more familiar for me with what was going on and maybe just a refresher of that. So the main part of the discussion today is going to kind of talk about nightly rentals and if we can make any adjustments to the land use table that's in the draft ordinance. And if we want to clarify any of the definitions for nightly rentals or any of the dwelling units that are in there. So I guess I just open it up back to the commission, or maybe City Manager Gagel, if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, Clerk Simon. I think you did a fantastic job researching and catching up with where the commission was at in discussion. And I just wanted to point out that the nightly rental definition in Title 19 per this ordinance, or it isn't defined in Title 19, but would be defined in this ordinance as a dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit, or attached dwelling unit used as a sleeping accommodation, which accommodates the traveling public for short-term stays. Rentals for 30 or more consecutive nights are considered a long-term residential rental. And that is on page 34. I also wanted to take a look at the land use table on page 46 and just point out that currently nightly rentals are allowed in the residential district, the waterfront commercial residential district. They are conditional use in commercial district and industrial district because primary residential use is also a commercial use for those districts. And in commercial business district, it is currently a secondary use, which is the terminology that used to be included in the district chapter, but now has been incorporated into the land use table and is defined as A use allowed on a lot or a parcel of land only if there is an allowed principal use on the property, meaning you can have a nightly rental in the commercial business district now, as long as you have an allowed primary purpose. So a nightly use is not that. But that they are also permitted in commercial residential. And if we need to, we can pull up what, that was the only other thing that crossed my mind, is to pull up and look at what is a primary purpose for the district, but you know, that's like retail, office space. There are a few different primary purposes, and that might be helpful to look at. Really, the discussion is, I think the focus and the intent of the discussion is that there is a desire to preserve the commercial business district as having a primary commercial purpose, which is why the administrative permit for long-term residential rentals was implemented in the first place. And up to 10% of the district can be a long-term residential rental. Because the council realized that there was a need for long-term residential rentals. And I believe that the community realizes that there is a need for nightly rentals. But this the same kind of quandary is, do we want to allow nightly rentals across the entire district, or put some kind of a cap, or only allow them as a secondary purpose with an additional primary? Thank you.
Does anyone have, do the commissioners have any questions? This is Randy Sweet. So I have a couple of questions. One is, you referred to some properties that are in the process of remodeling, and so there's some activity around rentals in the commercial business district. And I was wondering, can you identify who, on your spreadsheet, which properties you're talking about?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it should be, if you look on the side in the note section, but I can point out that it's, let's see. In line number 8, on the first page of that spreadsheet, there's one that's being used for nightly units right now, but it's vacant as far as the commercial purpose. And then line number 17 at the bottom is currently being renovated for nightly rentals, but has no other commercial business use at this time.
And if we're looking at that 10% cap, would those two properties be within that cap?
Through the chair, they would not be considered long-term residential rentals unless we're over 30 days. So I
Okay, so
think
those are just nightly.
those are nightly
So
rentals.
there's no, at this moment in time, there's no cap on nightly rentals. And then do the business owners know that there's the obligation for the commercial business as well as the nightly rental?
I believe that there's some confusion on whether that's an allowed use or not. The code does state it as a secondary use, but these individuals are trying to run them as a primary use. So that's a conversation, is we can keep it that way and enforce that. But we've been in this discussion for a while, so it'd be great to have direction by the commission and the council to make sure that we are providing the correct enforcement.
So it seems like people are doing things because that's, people have an idea and they're implementing something. And in the meantime, we're, as a commission or as an entity, we're not quite clear about what it is I mean, it's stated in the language is in there, but just the general understanding does not appear to be.
Right.
um,
Well, and I think there can be some confusion because if somebody was building a building for that purpose, we would
Mhm.
have a building permit and we would be able to provide that clarification, but we don't require a building permit for renovations. So we do provide notice that they need to operate as a business, but then the follow through on the staff part to be able to have that conversation of what is or isn't an allowed use. And then the other building did have a primary purpose up until the new ownership. So it wasn't an issue, but it was built as 3 nightly rentals and then a retail space. And now it is only being operated as rentals, which doesn't mean it can't be a retail space in the future unless they renovate that. But just making sure that we have clear language moving forward. And that really bigger question is are nightly rentals. Is there room for nightly rentals to be considered a primary purpose, or should they always remain secondary? Since there was some give through the administrative permit for long-term residentials.
And does the staff have a recommendation on what, excuse me, on what might be a good way forward?
The one thing that came to my mind is to include nightly rentals under the administrative permit. And just have either nightly or long-term residentials only to have a restricted portion of the district that would be allowed.
And current, go ahead.
And the primary is 51% of the floor space. That's what primary means.
So we do not have a defined area space, but we did provide examples because we would like to have some kind of a more defining language included. There is a community-wide perception, I believe, that it is 51%. So that may be the easiest way to go about it. But we did provide language from a few different communities. For instance, municipality of Anchorage and their business district says upper story residential uses are allowed. City and Borough of Sitka, and this starts on page 18. City Borough of Sitka says it should further prohibit exclusive residential or industrial uses which would interfere with the development and continuation of its cohesive business purpose, which is kind of nice. It leaves it a little bit open, but it just prohibits exclusive residential or industrial uses. Wrangle says that second story residential use is a permitted purpose. So only the second story. We've seen that twice now. And let me see here. They also state that uses and structure which are clearly incidental and subordinate to principal uses permitted and which will, that's the definition for accessory uses, and which will not create a nuisance or hazard are permitted. Fairbanks states that any permitted use in the general, in the central, but I don't know why it says, in the general, any permitted use in the general commercial district except residential uses on the ground floor. So again, that secondary story. We do have 3 buildings that it's not necessarily a second story, it's the second half of the building, which I think is why there is a 51%. So we could incorporate language that says secondary use, residential use is permitted as a second story or less than 51% of the business or the primary business use, something like that. That did not come out as clear as I was hoping it would, but a definition that left it with both, that residential uses are permitted as a second story use or as less than 49% of the overall building structure, as long as there is a primary use.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that there may be a good reason to do a 51% cap because that's what people kind of understand now, even though that it hasn't been documented.
Correct.
That the administrative form could be amended to add the nightly rentals. And then to put in a requirement that it's a second story for residential is permitted, and also less than 49% of the overall building space, as long as there's a primary commercial business in the building. So
Correct.
so that's kind of if we did that, that would be a good beginning to kind of document the sort of the pieces that are kind of floating around that could create some clarity to begin with. Maybe implement that and then let that kind of settle out, and then we can build on that, or, do a continuous improvement check on it after a period of time.
Yeah.
And I would just point out that right now we have 10% of the district can be long-term residential. And so that amounts to 3 permits. We currently have 2. So if we were to leave it at 10% and include the nightly rentals in that, we might consider looking at the percentage of that 10%. If we would only have room for 1 more permit if it was included in that.
This is Randy Sweet. So we're talking about 29 buildings, is that correct?
We have 29 parcels, so
But-
yeah, but they're not, 2 of them are vacant. So we're talking about 10% of the lots in the city. So that would amount to 10% would be 3. And right now we have 2 long-term residential rentals. There is no wait list right now, so there's no one else seeking a permit. But if we were to include nightly rentals in that, we might want to look at the percentage as well of raising it 10%, raising it, or making a separate percentage for long-term and short-term, just as a discussion point on how to do that.
So do you have any recommendation on what might be a good approach?
I would recommend that the commission refers this question back to the council to see if the council has any insight about if they want to include the nightly rentals as part of the administrative permit, and if they have any recommendations for increasing or keeping the 10% limit for the administrative permit. That way you get more voices and insight. And then it can come back to you guys with what they recommend. Or we can request that they join you for a joint meeting to talk about it.
So, I guess, one question will be bless you. So the second story part and the less than 49% of the building space, that could be something that we could act on today, or at least make that a recommendation, just so that that's kind of plugged into the conversation. And then perhaps at their discretion, if they would like, if they would either like to give us their feedback, or if they wanted to have, I guess, would it be a workshop
It could be, yeah.
to have a discussion about it?
Yeah.
Do the commissioners, do either of the commissioners have, would you like to recommend something, or just in terms of how the city council would interact with us? Do you have a preference, or would it be okay to let them decide how they would like to give their feedback to us? Do you have any?
Yeah, I think it should be at least 51%, but yeah, I think as far as a recommendation,
I'm sorry, I wasn't being clear. If the city manager recommended that we ask the city to weigh in on what the approach should, what the percentage of if adding the nightly rentals is something that they would be in sort of in agreement with, and then if they were, what percentage if they had a preference, what percentage should be used. So right now, the way that it's handled administratively, there are long-term rentals, and those are capped at 10%. And then if we add nightly rentals, perhaps we'd say, okay, well, then make it 10% for nightly rentals and 10% for the long-term. But, whatever, as an example, but if they wanted to weigh in on what that might be, was the question. And then the city manager was saying we could have a joint work session to discuss that, or they could just express a preference and then we could move forward with it.
Or you guys could express a preference either way.
So is it, I guess in one sense, if we gave them a recommendation, would that be, and I don't know if would that be a way to streamline it? Like if we gave it and said, well, this is what's going on, this is what we think might be a good approach, what do you think about it? And then that gives them something specific. And then either if we need to talk about it, we can do that. Or if they think, oh yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
Then
That would work as well. Yeah. I guess I was saying if you wanted more input, that would be an
Yeah,
appropriate way to do it. But if you already have a recommendation.
I'm just more clarifying
Yeah.
how are we going to do this, and what, because how sometimes things just take a long time to
Yeah.
happen, and then we could give the community clarity and then see how it works. And then if there's any adjustments that can be made, because I don't know that we know for sure how it's going to work. So it's just like, how do we make this, how do we do this so it's fairly straightforward and actually happens, and we can decide it and then move on to other things.
how about some input from those 29 people that own those lots? Maybe, that's who's gonna be doing it.
That's a great idea. What we could do is just plan for, unless we have more business for the next meeting, the May meeting, we could just plan on it being a joint work session with council. If council approves, and invite the public and send out notice, or, specifically target the commercial business district to invite them for the discussion. That's a great idea.
Yeah, because I don't really feel like I know
Yeah.
what would be the right thing right now. I have
Yeah.
no idea.
Not to keep having the discussion over and over again, but that'd be great to have that input. Yeah. It's up to you guys. You can just have direction, provide direction and have a consensus, and we can move forward. But if you feel like you need to have it recorded as a motion, that's as well, but it's not an official action, so it's just a recommendation. And then that gives us freedom to move forward and plan it. Would you guys like it would you like to have it separate from the next meeting, like prior to the next meeting? Or if there isn't further business for the next meeting, to just count that as the main meeting? Do you have a preference? I know your guys' time is valuable.
Yeah, and then Ren will be here too. We'll have one more person, right?
Yeah, yeah, Commissioner Ryan, she should be here then too.
Does that sound good to you? So our consensus then is to have the staff set up would it be considered a workshop then? To invite the public and the city council to weigh in on how to go forward on how the nightly rentals will be incorporated into the commercial business ordinance and the administrative form.
Perfect. And then we will update the ordinance for that discussion with that upper story or 51% language and/or.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so then the next item would be staff reports, and I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if my mic was on. So the staff reports and the update on the 2021 variance request for Blodgett.
Yes, so I just wanted, it seems like it's been a while now, wanted to provide an update to the commission that the city did have a survey completed on the sewer main that was running through, that we identified that was running through Mr. Blodgett's property that he's requesting a variance for, and we did provide that to Mr. Blodgett. He was working on a survey for his request and was going to provide that back to the city, but we haven't had any further information from him at this time.
So at this point, sort of there's work in progress to get to a packet that can actually be submitted to the commission. So we're just continuing to make progress, but we're not quite there in terms of having a formal packet submitted.
Correct. Yep. We're just waiting on the applicant's portion of their survey.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that, I remember last time we talked about it, has he talked to his neighbors as far as building on there?
So I did have a conversation with Mr. Blodgett pertaining to the neighboring lot, and I believe I did reach out, or I did confirm through the Denali Commission process. What happened is that lot, or he provided information that confirmed the neighboring lot that he's requesting to butt up to, that says deed parcel, is in a trust that was supposed to be deeded to SFL, and the owners have passed on. There isn't anybody left to contact for that parcel. And it was a part of the Denali Commission's process that they were going to help facilitate that transfer of that deed. And they just hit a standstill. They weren't able to ever move forward with it. But the applicant, Mr. Blodgett, does pay for the property tax for that property, and he does maintain it, since it is all of the fuel lines from the bulk fuel storage go down and through that property. He does consider that as a part of his of SFL's property. It's just in this weird no man land that the SFL pays for, and is there's I guess apparently there's a deed, but nobody to confirm it left.
So this is Randy Sweet, so that would be a discussion at the time that the packet is submitted.
Yeah,
And then is there, since people have passed away, I guess that will just need to be resolved at the time, but is it a city obligation on that in terms of deed transfer, or is it a Denali commission?
I think they were involved because of the infrastructure running through the lot, but I don't think they were ever able to make any headway. And I should have brought, I wish I would have brought that email with me with that
And-
information, but I can, when the discussion comes up. So I was with that, I was just trying to say that, yes, we can get a hold of other neighboring lands, but as for direct neighbors, that parcel is under site control of SFL.
Right.
SFL has the property up above, and Mr. Blodgett is the owner of SFL, Seldovia Fuel and Lube. So he is the neighbor. And then below is considered a row, but the city utilizes it as Mermaid Park.
So the property transfer issue will need to be dealt with. And then once the packet is submitted, then beyond the adjoining properties, the people in the neighborhood get noticed about what is being proposed.
Correct.
And then the Mermaid Park, would the Parks and Recs Commission then be noticed as an interested party?
We don't currently have an active Parks and Recs Commission, but that is something to consider, yes.
So I guess what we're saying right now is there are some potential interested parties, and then there are some issues that will need to be resolved, but all of those are tied to a packet actually being submitted formally to the city.
Correct.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, so that's where the fuel pipes run through. Is that deeded parcel?
Correct.
So. And he owns the fuel farm?
He owns the property that it's on. The city owns the distribution lines and the tanks. But Mr. Blodgett owns the property that the fuel, bulk fuels tanks sit on. And then Mr. Blodgett maintains the parcel, the deeded parcel next to lot 27A, lot 10.
Right. And I remember that he wanted zero setback on that. I'm just, with all the snow we had, I don't know if you want a bunch of snow coming off somebody's roof and hitting those pipes. I mean, it's something to think about when he wants to build. That's about all I had.
And I should follow through with, we are waiting for the survey back from Mr. Blodgett, but we also are waiting back for further discussion with him on the city being able to implement an easement for the sewer main that is through his property. So.
Not to back up, but that last discussion we had on the nightly rentals, it also said recreation vehicles.
Correct.
We didn't talk anything about them, right?
Not at this meeting. We did at the previous meeting, and if you'd like to talk more about it, we can.
Oh, I just seen it was on, it was in the paperwork here.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, no, I just thought maybe we forgot about it.
No, I just seen it there. I mean, I listened. I mean,
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, I just seen it was on the paperwork here, so I just thought maybe it was something we forgot to talk about, but. You know, I mean, that could probably be classified as night rental too, you know, if you brought your, you know what I mean? Onto that property, whoever's got it.
You know, through the chair, Commissioner Farsberg, that might be something to consider in the work session with the council as well. If we want to, if you want to keep that on the topic of just the nightly rentals, or if you want to get more perspective on the RVs as well, could consider that.
So this is Randy Sweet. So if it's something that somebody might be inclined to do, it might be good to talk about it so that we get input. And so if there's a decision that, you know, as we're creating the decision process here, then whatever things might be factors in what people might be thinking about nightly rentals, then it would be good to say, do we want this in this area or no? And any other, you know, as you're thinking about this and looking at, as the staff is looking at it, perhaps just look at it with an eye to, are there any things that should be considered so that we're kind of taking advantage of the conversation and getting any input that the property owners might have.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I think we could use some more input. in that as well.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Kroll, any other feedback?
I just wonder what the concerns are for building on the sewer line.
Yes, that's a very big concern and something that the city is working with the applicant to ensure does not happen, because we need to be able to have access to our sewer infrastructure in case of emergency at all times.
Thank you. And then the next item is, so we'll move on to the next item, and that's information items not requiring actions. And it's the fiscal year 24 budget process has begun. And so did you want to speak to that?
I just wanted to bring awareness to the commission, if you're interested at all, that the city of, or the Seldovia City Council and the city of Seldovia is in discussion about the FY24 budget. We did have a work session on this Monday that focused on the special revenue funds, which are water, sewer, harbor, boat haul out, storage yard area. That's one. And water, sewer, boat haul out, storage yard, harbor, and dock. All of the account funds were presented in the black, except for the dock, which its primary revenue source is the ferry. So if we don't, if our ferry schedule is cut short, so is the revenue for the dock. A 4.3% consumer price index increase was recommended, along with a 4.6 COLA increase for staff, and an implementation of credit card fees to help cover the cost of credit card transactions with the city. And this Monday, we will be discussing the fee schedule at 4:30 p.m. Which will show those rate changes and just any minor changes that are happening in the fee schedule for FY24. And the following meeting, April 24th, I want to say it is, we'll have a discussion on the general fund revenue. So that, or an expense count. So that'll be administration, council, public safety, public works. So if anybody wants to tune in, that's where we're at right now in discussion. It's looking pretty decent, but there will be, some increases due to that consumer price index increase.
Thank you. And the next item is comments of the public. Have we had any public join us?
No, we don't have any public at this time. We can
And
move on.
then, comments of the commission. Commissioner Fosberg, do you have any comments?
Did anything, get, figured out on that new septic tank?
Through the chair, if you don't mind, if I could take
Please.
a couple minutes on it. That is a great question, Commissioner Forsberg. So the city received their 95% draft so preliminary engineering report just last week. It's being presented at the the council meeting on Monday with a resolution in support of the city pursuing construction funding for that facility. The recommendation did change from just originally, they were gonna recommend alternative one, which was to empty out and reconstruct that septic tank. They still want to do that, but as a part of a phase for the final recommendation, which is to invest in an aerated lagoon. So they're looking at properties around the city or outside of city limits. It looks like they are recommending a property near the Rocky Ridge landfill right now and piping the raw wastewater to the aerated lagoon where it will filter through and then be piped into a new outfall line out into the bay. This is happening for a couple of reasons. One being that the original recommendation for outfitting our current septic tank didn't meet the qualifications for DEC regulations for secondary treatment. And two, because during this process, there's been multiple conversations between the engineering firm and the city of Seldovia about, well, where does the waste go? Where does the septic go once it's in the septic tank, right? We haven't pumped our septic tank since the 1990s because we don't have a great place. We are either ferrying it across once a month. Was there a recommendation to have a septic truck and ferry it once a month? Or there is a small lagoon outside of town that SNA operates, but when I spoke with SNA, they don't have the capacity to be able to handle what the city is requesting. So the aerated lagoon will have an associated cost for users once it is operational. There'll be an operational cost, and it looks like it'll be about an additional $22 a month per customer. And that's really unfortunate. We're trying to keep costs as low as possible. On the other hand, though, this is a really good long-term solution that hopefully, prevents us from having to worry about where we're going to put our waste in the future. Yeah, and helps us be compliant because we are not right now.
And then the old one, it's gotta be maxed out pretty much where it's at right now. I mean, it was
Yeah.
built a long time ago.
Yeah, so they believe it's holding 70,000 gallons right now, and we know that it does with high tides wash out. So that there's for environmental reasons and to have a short-term solution. Part of the proposal is to still clean it out, get it working, do that first alternative, and then they'll do the second alternative.
Thank you. Commissioner Cole, do you have any comments? And this is Randy Sweet. I just had a question. There's been buildings that have been damaged because of snow, and I'm familiar with at least 3 that have been damaged, and I didn't know what role the city has in terms of, I don't, so I guess my question is, what role does the city have, and do the landowners have a particular time to repair and fix? And how does that work? And is that part of our remit or no?
That's a great question. And yes, I would think that that would be part of your remit. It's something that's been on the board for a long time for us to talk about a vacancy ordinance or, I believe in the past we have discussed, I can't remember the correct terminology. But I don't know if you remember, we had an ordinance that was presented from Anchorage that talked about, it was like a vacancy ordinance that talked about buildings that were not being maintained. And there were fees associated with that. We weren't ever able to reach a consensus. It even went to the council level, and the council wasn't able to reach a consensus on what to do about that discussion. But seeing these buildings definitely brings it back to the forefront that should be a consideration in the near future, a discussion of what does it mean for the city and property owners, for the city when properties are not being maintained or taken care of and end up in a derelict or
And that-
damaged.
Or, yeah, because we've
condition.
had basically catastrophic failures, so that,
Yeah. If you would like us to bring something forward for that week, we can definitely, I mean, it's on our list to bring forward, but that's a great reminder to bring it forward sooner than later.
it would seem like it would be helpful, and then just helpful to the property owners, and then I guess just there's situations where there's absolutely there's some safety issues, and then is it an attractive nuisance? Could somebody at any rate, so it seemed like it should be given some push it up on the priority scale, just to make sure that maybe in the ordinances that are being looked at, particularly for things that might be unsafe, then that would be helpful to know, what do we need to do, because are we taking on any liability as a city if we don't, at least act on it? And then is there a good framework? And it's not to get on the property owners. It's just how do we deal with things when there's something that fails, and then what's the best approach so that you actually get, things get taken care of.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did the staff have any comments, anything before we adjourn?
I just wanted to welcome on Clerk Diamond and thank you all really for being here. I know it's been a little while. This is, I hopefully, even though it was short, I think you guys provided great direction, and hopefully this is just the start of many more discussions, not the same discussion, but many more discussions in the future where we can see progress moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you both, and welcome. Liz. So our next meeting will be May 3rd, and that one will be a workshop meeting as we've discussed. And we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at, I guess it's 6:54.
Yeah, so we do need a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make an emotion.
I second it.
Thank you, commissioners. And this is Randy Sweet. I also agree to the motion to adjourn. So we are adjourned.
You guys.